Hey, this is B-Flame for the Hortoccult. What's up, everybody? How y'all doing? On this episode of the podcast, me and Brad sit down and discuss desert trees. We had a podling give us a shout out and wanted to know some different varieties of desert trees, and so that's what we did. So we go over some small, medium, and large desert trees. We pick out the ones that we're more familiar with and we go over their traits and talk about them. So if you listeners out there would like us to have a topic, feel free to get us on Facebook. We have our Instagram, our Twitter, email is the horticulture at Gmail. Just send us a message and we'll do the best we can to get out an episode. And so let's get it on. So I'm B-Flame.
And I am B-Rad.
And we are the Hortoccult. Thanks for coming along for the ride.
You're welcome.
On this episode of the podcast, we have a question from a viewer, a listener, you might say, a podling.
Right? A podling, yeah.
And he found our podcast while working in the Nevada desert. He's from California, and he would like to know what are some ultra hardy tree species for Mountain West deserts.
Okay.
So I've done some little research. I'm not super experty on the deserty because we're desert, but we're kind of a different kind of desert.
It's a high mountain desert.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what part of Nevada he's working in. So probably along the border of California somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
The southern is a lot different from the northern.
Yeah. It's probably the Sierra, high level Sierra.
Yeah. So if he's in the southern part with like Vegas and stuff, or the Mojave.
Yeah.
The old Mojave Desert.
I mean, what jumps out at me right off the bat is the mesquite. And of course, he's probably very aware of that. It's everywhere.
Yeah, boy. There's a bunch of varieties.
Yeah.
So I was able to find a list of species and we could talk about them. Breaks the trees down into small, medium, and large.
Right.
The mesquites are in the small.
And what is that? In feet, what are we talking about?
10 to 30. 25, 30. 30 is the max. Looks like 8 is the smallest. So anywhere in between that range.
Between 8 and 30 in width and height?
In width and height.
Okay.
It looks good. They are low in the water use. So that's how I was kind of trying to determine hardiness, because if you're in the desert, you're probably going for more heat hardy than cold hardy.
Right.
It's my guess.
But as we all know, in the desert, it does get extremely cold at night. Well, and that fluctuation between the super hot middle of the day,
right,
and the night temperatures can be considerable, like a huge drop. So plants and trees and whatnot need to be dynamic, even protect their bark.
Characteristics that they show. They grow slow. They're slow growers for the most part. Okay. I would say the majority of desert, because they just don't have as many resources, it's part of their conserving the water issue going on. So they're going to be smaller.
Okay.
Thorns. They're going to have thorns. That's what makes me think of
what's the purpose of that? Just
to protect from animals trying to get their goods,
chomping on their cambium, their bark, and
their leaves are going to be smaller. So that's another adaptation. Maybe even like fuzzy, you could say, fuzzy leaves.
What's the advantage to?
They're not going to transpire as much.
Okay, yeah,
because there's not as much surface area. So very shady plants.
Shady individual.
Yeah, no, you gotta watch out for them shady suckers. Those the plants that are like the shade have very large foliage because they're trying to absorb as much light as possible. Mm-hmm. So they have smaller little leaves.
Yes.
So they're not getting overheated.
They're not little openings in the pores in their leaf,
in their stomati.
Yeah, they're trying to
their little stomati,
their leaf mouths.
But those are just the ones that I was thinking of. That's just me in general when you talk about desert.
Yeah, that's perfect because like the mesquite tree, and shrub, they definitely have the small, little tiny, ovate shape.
So this guy, so if we go through the mesquites,
Yeah.
well, there's 3 on this list. I'm not going to go over them all. I'll just say mesquites, and they're 25 to 30 feet height width. They are spring and summer flowering. They are deciduous, so they're dropping their leaves. Fast grower,
But in desert terms, that's
slow to regular people.
Yeah, it's pretty slow.
But they're on the very low. They're on the low on the water usage.
So don't put it like in the lowest part of your yard, right? Like you've got in the back,
right where the water sinks to.
Sure, yeah.
And they do have them thornies. Yes. All 3 of those varieties
have the thornies.
This one gives us a landscape use. The uses for the mesquite would be a wall or screen and a wildlife habitat.
Okay.
So there we go. Those are probably very native, I'm guessing.
I would say that's.
Is there any other mesquite? Oh, there's another one. Chilean mesquite. Height 30-30. So there
a little bigger.
Fast.
Yeah.
It says fast.
Okay.
It's a low to medium water use. And yes, it does have spines and thorns. Wall or screen and wildlife habitat. So there you go. And then it gives a little thingy talky about it, but description or attribute.
One of my favorites in the small category would be the chased tree. Vitex is another word for it, another term, which is the genus. And I actually, so I have a little bit of experience with this particular shrub. It's in my backyard. It can tolerate here where we're at, which is much colder, right? And much higher in elevation. What's interesting though, is that it does, so on here, it shows that tree can get to 25 feet tall and wide. The one that I have, because of the cold, dies back, not to the ground completely, but it dies back to really a nice shrub size. So, like a 3-4 foot shrub. It has this great 7 leaflet palmate shaped leaf. Palmate shaped leaf. Super unique. And it's quite tolerant of many locations and pollution and things like that. So, and there's probably many other great things about it as well. Butterflies, things like that.
Yep, that right there. That's one of his attributes. It says butterflies.
Oh, peppery scent.
Is that true?
Never thought about that. I'll have to sniff it next time.
And it's a colory cultivar. Has colory cultivars.
Yeah, it has these beautiful purplish kind of spiky flowers. Really, really beautiful. Anyway.
So it says it's a medium. Has a semi-frowny face on the water use.
Well, and medium is great because you can. Yeah,
it can go both ways.
It can go both ways. But with my experience, it definitely gets a fair amount of water. And of course, the more water you give your plants, the bigger they're going to get. You either prune them back or you simply just let them go.
So there's a lot on this list that I'm not super familiar with.
Okay.
Like ones that I know that I've heard of that we should use or try to use here that I've never seen used. Or maybe I just didn't know which one it was.
Yeah.
Like right here, the Japanese pagoda tree. Like I've heard that a ton to use. It can get pretty big, up to 50 feet high and to 50 feet wide. So it's 30 to 50 feet high, 30 to 50 feet wide.
Yeah, that's going to be a good shade tree.
Creeping into the medium size. So the medium size is from 20 to 50, looks like. So yeah. And
you've heard of golden rain tree?
Yes, I have.
Not to be confused with golden chain tree.
If I had to pick one of those two, I would definitely pick the golden rain. Golden rain over the golden chain.
Okay.
Just because that's more of a shade tree. It has a habit. I'm familiar with the shape and stuff. It's nice and round.
Hardier for sure.
It has a taproot.
Yeah.
That one has a taproot. So
be prepared.
It is beautiful. And it has a really cool flower, and then it has a really cool pod, has interest pre-fall. The issue with it is that germinates very easily, the seeds.
Okay.
So you can have a lot of them in your yard. I would say as much as a Norway maple.
So the seeds are inside the pod, the little
Yeah.
lantern pod.
Yep. And there's like 3 or 4 in there. And then they just are very easily germinated
Yeah.
in the environment.
So maybe it's a good idea to clean up when those have fallen in the.
Yeah. I mean, the seeds are pretty BB size. Like they're just these round little black
Be fun for kids.
thingamajabs. But yeah, that's the only knock on that guy. Other than that, I like the shape. I like the leaves. It has a nice. Does it have a? I'm not. This doesn't go over fall color. I make fun of that. That's actually something that people. It's a medium water use.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a litter section on here, and the Golden Rain does not have. Oh yeah, it does.
Okay.
There, so that's something to watch out for. The little seeds. No thorns or spines.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful flowering and
bottle tree.
You know that one?
Yeah. Well, I know that it's not able to grow here where we're at the Wasatch Front, but
Gets too cold here.
Gets too cold. Yeah. But I have seen it in the desert areas in Arizona and Nevada, and it's beautiful. It's a nice landscape. It's smaller leaves.
So it has a green trunk.
Yeah. So green trunk would be like the bark, right?
Yeah.
And the bark is usually when it's green, it's thin. It's thin cell walled, and so it's very susceptible to cold damage. I can picture it as I'm driving down into the desert. I can see this tree. But anyway, really why people use this tree so much is the flower. The flower is fantastic. But chinkapin oak.
Chinkapin oak?
That we use here in the Wasatch Front. Okay. It's kind of a new one. You don't see that a lot, but it has pretty has that same lobed.
So I wanted to ask you real quick, because I had never seen this before. And on this little graph we have, it says tree type and semi-evergreen. I wasn't sure what a semi-evergreen was. So I had never even heard of these. So it just goes over, it just says seasonally they'll drop sometimes. Example, they may shed their foliage for a very short time in the late winter and rejuvenate rather quickly.
Okay.
So this is semi-evergreen. Or they won't lose all of them.
Yeah.
They'll just lose some of them for a fraction of the year and it'll grow back.
So not to panic when you see it dropping its leaves.
So,
or its needles, I guess.
I guess they can be labeled as that. I've never seen a tree labeled as semi-evergreen.
Yeah.
I think I'd be like, what the heck are you talking about? For a second, I thought it was different way to say a broadleaf evergreen, but
yeah,
semi-evergreen, and then it says semi-deciduous. So they can also, it's the same kind of thing. It's just how they label it.
Mm-hmm.
Sheds its leaves in the cooler months, and it retains them during the milder, warmer months.
Well,
and then grows them back.
Yeah, that's a great question, because a whole lot of things were going through my head as far as like the bald cypress and the dawn redwood and these conifers, really, but they're deciduous. They drop their needles and leaves. But in warmer climates, from where we're at, quite often they are evergreen, but they still need to rejuvenate. And it's like all plants rejuvenate, right? Every plant out there. Whether it's competition for light, so where they retract their chlorophyll and reuse that the nutrients somewhere else, and this is kind of one of those things where it's just kind of shedding its leaves or dropping a lot of them, not all of them. I see this in St. George. So like our desert, the Utah desert portion of the state, dropped 90% of its leaves. Some ashes will do that. But then they'll flush right back out. And it's just a cleaning. I think it's just a cleaning process that a tree does.
Yeah, I had seen that term and I was just like, what the heck are you talking about?
That's very cool.
Some of these other ones, these large trees that it has on the list, are more what I'm familiar with, but I wouldn't consider them desert trees. That has a Japanese Zelkova on here. I'm aware of the oak holly, but the black locust, I mean, that's not a tree I would recommend at all.
The thing is, though, Wasatch Front area, the black locust, and even the purple robe locust. Problems. They're weak. Their bark is weak. Their trunk is weak, and their branch unions are quite weak. And so,
Yep.
wind, snow load, problems. So in order to overcome that, heavy pruning. But we're talking an area of the country and the other states that are more desert-like, lower elevation, where that tree is going to grow slower with less water, because you know how we water here, just like dump buckets and buckets of water, and that's not going to do this locust any good. They are amazingly, I think that's a great mention as far as the locust in a desert like area, for sure.
It even has them listed as medium.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm surprised about that too.
Medium, possibly. Yeah, you could err either on one way or the other as far as the water intake.
I don't think you can find those commercially here.
They do have some that you can
like
buy
different varieties now.
Yeah, I've seen some in the Springville municipality park. It's kind of like in a little arboretum, and so they're just like trying to diversify as much as possible, and which is cool. You'll walk by and you'll be like, "Whoa, what is that crazy like black barked tree that has these leaves that you recognize, but for some reason you've never seen them before."
It does have on here the lacebark elm, which I am a fan of lacebark elm.
Yep.
And they have a bunch of varieties of that too, with different flowering and whatever. That says that's one of our semi-evergreens.
Oh, cool. That's a big daddy too.
Yeah, 50 plus feet wide, 40 to 60 high. Takes a long time. Actually, that's a faster grower. Oh, it says medium, moderate.
Okay.
Moderate growth.
That's fair. I mean, that's what we essentially that's what we planted in the parking lot in American Fork at the Marinda place.
Yeah.
Lacebark elm. Yeah.
I think the other thing that that is a desert kind of characteristic, tolerant to salt.
Yes.
That's one other thing I just thought of. Alkaline soils. These guys can tolerate alkaline soils.
The lacebark elm.
Well, that for sure.
Yeah.
Just as an overall, like, kind of, when I think of a desert tree, can be without water for long periods.
Okay.
Has hardwood, like almost brittle, thorny, deep roots, or shallow. Could it go either way?
It could go either way. Yeah, shallow, and then maybe just expand further on the surface of the soil. Because when it does rain and that water percolates super fast,
it wants to grab it right away.
Yeah. 3 ashes. So the Fraxinus and the Fraxinus genus. A lot of us know the ash group.
Well, they're all the same family.
Velutina.
Which they just have different little cultivars off of it.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing.
Oaks. There's a fair amount of oaks that
if you got time,
mm-hmm.
if you got a lot of time for your yard to develop, oaks are pretty freaking awesome.
Little super mini side note up at Red Butte Garden. Okay. The arboretum there, and I see on the list here live oak. God, I could go into this for many hours, but they had a grove of these live oaks that were hybridized. Cotham's groves, and he had hybridized these oaks together, and they didn't lose their leaves. They're deciduous, right? These guys were evergreen. Nuts. Super cool. And oaks are super strong, so it's like, okay, the snow load would come in and they would pile up on the trees, and oaks are tough as nails, no problem. There was no breakage, there was no issues there. A hybridized live oak.
Well, those are just some that, I mean, there's actually quite a few that you can find. Some are going to be more hardy to fit your situation than others. Always thinking about like soil and pHs and stuff. I think these guys have adapted to those kind of maybe pHs that aren't as desirable. That's why they can grow where they can grow. They're gonna want most desert areas sand, so they're accustomed to that. very well-drained soil,
well-drained soil,
which
yeah.
is not really, I mean, we have that here, but it's in certain pockets. I would say most of our soil is more the clay. At least that
down in the basin.
yeah, and that's where I live. All the
Yeah.
rich people live on the hill, so they have sand.
They have the rocky scree, the sandy, sharp drainage.
Yeah. Hopefully this will help our listener Zane out on his stuff. So thank you, Zane.
All right.
We'll see you later.
Later.
All right, well, there we go. That was episode number 97, Desert Trees. I want to thank Brad for coming out and doing this podcast with me. I want to thank our podling Zane for the topic. Thank you so much for sending us a message. If any other podling out there listening would like to have us do a topic for them, just give us a little shout out and we will do it. You can find us on all them other social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They're all the Hortoccult. At Hortoccult or at the Hortoccult. You can email us at thehorticcult@gmail.com. And don't forget about the YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, the Hortoccult. Thanks so much, and plant on, Babylon.